First of all, welcome everyone to our speech. Today we're going to be talking about evolving old ideas into hyper-casual games, and we will give some tips for those smaller teams that will need these tips. So, first of all, we're going to introduce ourselves. After that, we will tell you how did we evolve our old puzzle game into more like a game like a hyper-casual. Then we will talk about how we solve replayability and how you can solve replayability. We will also compare differences between procedural levels and handmade levels. Then we're going to talk about adapting trends and how you can actually pick the right trends for your ideas and how to actually go about finding those trends. And we're going to give some tips on how we sped up our development process and what you can do to do the same thing. And if you are going to have questions, we can also have that.
So now we are going to introduce ourselves. My name is Muhamed, and this is my colleague Armin. We are from Bosnia and Herzegovina and represent Monad Games. We are both 18-year-old, and we are one of the youngest teams in the Bosnia and Herzegovina, youngest game development teams. And I think we are youngest speakers here in conference right now. We found our ground in hyper-casual, and we now are working also in Web3 technology. Next slide. Let me introduce you to Monad Games a little bit more and our parent company, MonetizeAd. So Monad Games is a small game dev team, as I said, from Bosnia and Herzegovina, and it is founded by MonetizeAd, one of the largest affiliate marketing companies in the southeastern Europe. We are here today because they helped us to achieve our dreams. Me and my friend Armin, we always dreamed about creating games from the young age, and biggest dream is to make a game development scene bigger and better in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So now we are one step ahead, one step closer to achieving that goal, and we want to thank MonetizeAd for helping us accomplish those goals.
So now we're going to talk about how we evolved our old puzzle game into a hyper-casual. So in 2021, we had this game that you see, a version 1. And it was a classic puzzle game in which you go choose a color and you solve the colors. It's like a color puzzle game. But this game had a lot of problems. It wasn't replayable because it had like a really small amount of levels that when you finish them, you can't really play them again. And the gameplay was too easy. Now, sometimes that's good, but at this game, it's a puzzle game. But it didn't really make sense to have levels in which you can choose your own way. So we needed to change that. And the game look was not sensational, didn't look good. The colors were really awful. So that game didn't go well. So we decided to identify the problems, and those were the problems. So in the version 2 that we did a little bit after that, we solved some issues by creating procedural levels. And this makes sense for a puzzle game like this because you can always make more levels, and games like this can have procedural levels. Because the first version was too easy, we decided to make some new rules. So all of you know about the snake game on the old phones. So we took a mechanic from that game, so you can't go back on the tracks you were. So the gray tiles represent the tiles you were on, and if you stand on them, you die. Just same thing in a snake game. So that was a new mechanic we added. We also added portals to increase the size of levels and make it better for the users. And we decided to add new colors that would be more colorful, but we, at that time, stick with dark colors because we thought that in the United States, people love the dark colors. But eventually, we decided that it's not a good idea. And after that, the version 3, the game that we have right now, and that is showing promising KPIs, we improved that game mostly by actually improving the feel of the gameplay. In the old versions, cube was just a cube, and it was a rolling cube, and that's it. In this game, we added a jelly physics to it. So it's not a cube, it's more like a jelly cube. And when you play it, it feels like a jelly is moving. And that, for many users, adds the satisfaction. So that was one of the trends we added, and we're going to talk about that later. And what we did in that game, we added some of the progress bars and stuff like that you will see later. But the most important thing that helped us is by improving colors. We make them lighter, but also more happy, more poppy, colorful. And we didn't really remove dark colors. We just mix them. So we have sometimes we have light colors and with light backgrounds, and sometimes we have dark colors with dark backgrounds. So it's like best of both worlds.
So we will talk now about solving replayability in our game and comparing it to some other games that are not strictly hyper-casual and how they approach it. So in our game, if it is goal to pop all colors and not step on your backtracks, so there need to be a lot of levels because people will finish those levels fast. So that's why create a procedural algorithm. But that approach of replayability and the many levels, so we can increase it, that worked for us. It doesn't work for everyone. Why? The core of replayability problem comes down to the game design itself. What do you want to accomplish with your game design? So that's why we developed our thinking, how we think about solving replayability, and we will now present it. So we approach replayability by identifying core pillars of the game. So the gameplay, is it complex? Does it have a variety, or is it simple? Repetitiveness. Does the game eventually add new content, or it stays the same? And does it depend on the content, or the content itself is just an addition to the feel of the game? Why do we mention these core principles that we all talked about in these days? Because hyper-casual is evolving and it changes day by day. And we can see here 3 games that are not strictly hyper-casual, except the first one, but they can really teach us about solving replayability. So in the first case, we see Flappy Bird. Flappy Bird is an instant hit that rule all over the world, and we all know about it. It's now an icon of the gaming industry and maybe one of the first true hyper-casual games. So it didn't depend on any content. It didn't have any depth. It didn't have it had repetitive gameplay without variations, but the core of that replayability of that game is it's really addicting. Gameplay was really addicting. Nowadays, it's really hard to achieve that. But if someone has innovative idea that is really good and makes that game, it's easier and faster to iterate those games. But it's nowadays more probably less probable. So other game. If we consider this as a big chart, we can, from the left to the right, we can see more repetitiveness, simple gameplay, less repetitiveness, advanced gameplay. In the middle, we choose to show Subway Surfers. Why? So Subway Surfers is one of the greatest mobile games of all time, and it is one of the first casual games that we had on the market for like about 10 years now. So gameplay is still simple. Gameplay we can all understand. You go left and right, jump and slide. Thing is, it isn't as simple as, for example, Flappy Bird. Why? It has some variations. Every now and then, you have something new to do in your game. You can fly. You can hover a skateboard. You can. You can launch a rocket, etc., etc. It is everything revolves around the core principle: go forward. But it has many variations. So that's why we put it in the middle of this like chart. What also a difference between Subway Surfers and Flappy Bird? Subway Surfers has a lot of additional content, but that gameplay and its repetitiveness and its replayability does not depend on content. Why? So it's most probably all the content is the skins and the map look, but map can function even if it doesn't look good. But the core of the Subway Surface it actually looks good. So and also what improved Subway Surface over the Flappy Bird, it has a metagame. It has advanced metagames, tasks, and depth to it. Okay. And now for the third, we have Istanbul, guys. That is a really popular game nowadays. It's a multiplayer game that started as IO. So it's somewhere between hybrid casual and mid-core game right now. We will see in the future how they improved it. But that difference is from the other games and how they approach the replayability, they solely depend on content. gameplay doesn't change. Gameplay doesn't change in terms of mechanics, but the content and the map changes. So gameplay then really depends on the maps. If there are no new maps every now and then, this game will die, as many of those games, as Fortnite, etc. So there need to be a really big creative team that creates new maps, new obstacles, etc., for people to play. And so now, if we compare these three games, we can when we game design our game, we should pick where our game stands in this chart and try to approach the game in the right way. Yeah.
Okay, so we spoke about these games. Now let's talk about procedural versus handmade levels. Now you see, both of these have their own pros and cons. For some games, procedural levels will make more sense, but for some, handmade levels will actually make more sense. The reason for this is because for some games, you really need to have a full creative control over your levels to make them look the way you want, to add the stuff you want. But for some games, like our puzzle game, we don't need a full artistic control. We need the levels to, we need to have a lot of levels that we don't need to create by hand, but we also need them to look okay, you know, and to be finishable so you can solve the puzzle. So procedural levels are easier to make because you make one algorithm and then you use that algorithm for every other level. And compare that to handcrafted levels, you need to make every level again. Yes, you may have assets and 3D models, but you do need to assemble those levels. So procedural levels are easier to make, but will give us less artistic control. They will almost always favor quantity over quality because you make procedural levels to get more levels out of it. Are generally harder to balance out depending on the game. We needed to use biases, something like presets, to tweak the levels based on the level that the player is on, so we can make them easier and harder the way we want. But for example, when we create handcrafted levels, we can choose how hard each level is by hand, so we don't give the control to algorithm to choose how hard the level is. So it's about you choosing which type of levels you want, and it will always depend on your choice and on the game you're creating. And if it's a simple game, like a puzzle game, like with on the left here, procedural levels will almost always work. But if it's a more complex game, sometimes it's better to make handcrafted levels, and then to, let's say, if you have 50 levels, shuffle them. So like 51 level will be 34th. But, you know, for some games, it's better to have handcrafted levels than procedural, and vice versa.
So now we will talk about how we can mix procedural and handcrafted levels. Thing is, I want to make sure that I mention one big caveat about procedural levels and all this topic. Not every game that you think that can be more procedural will work. For example, biggest example in that industry that where mechanics are simple and puzzle games, you think that levels are procedural. It's match 3 games. Candy Crush Saga. That game. Every level is handcrafted, even if it looks procedural. So you need to really think about it. That's why we are going to tell how we actually approach procedural levels in our game to balance out the gameplay, pacing, etc. So as Armin said, we biased the procedure generator. We gave it content and we gave it enough variables, and we created presets. Those presets define how the level will be generated at that right moment. So is it a big level? Is it a small level? How many colors it needs to pop? How many tiles it needs to pop? Does it have portals, etc., etc.? What is cool about it is every time you play a new level, it's totally new level. So it isn't for everyone one level. For example, if you're level 10, not everyone will have the same level on level 10. So it really makes us control what type of levels happen, but they are not physically same. Example, we balanced all of those stuff. What I wanted to say is, just a sec. I think I said all. Yeah. Okay. I think I. That's okay.
Okay. So let's talk about adapting trends to an existing concept. So we had, as we said, we had that puzzle game, and it was not a hyper casual. It was just a classic puzzle game that didn't make sense even as a puzzle game. But we decided to try and convert it to a hyper casual by adding some more elements, but most importantly, looking at the trends. So what was the trend when we created this game? It was ragdoll physics trend. So you know the stickman, for example, and how he moves and how he wiggles. So that is a trend. That's something that people really love, and they still love it. So what we decided to do for our game it was to take that trend, but let's convert it, make our own spin of it by adding it to a cube. So it's not a ragdoll. It's not a humanoid body. It was a cube. So what we decided to do it was to actually create a jelly. So when a cube moves, it moves like a jelly, and that's that part of a stickman ragdoll physics. So when determining trends, it is really important to find out, is that a content trend or is it a game design trend? So if it is a game design trend, it is something that you do inside of the gameplay. So for example, the way we did it. But if it's a content trend, it can be anything like social media trends on like puppets, those things that are satisfying to people. You can add that in your game. Or for example, when TV show Squid Game exploded, many people added content that referenced Squid Game in some way in their games to leverage that trend. And for some, it worked. But for some, of course, it didn't. When looking for trends, try not to just copy the trends and hope for the best, but more dissect the trend and try to find out why the trend was trending and why it came to the point to be a trend. And when you do that, you can actually make your own spin of it. And from the trend you took, you can make your own trend. It possibly could work. So as said, we implemented that trend by looking at unpredictable physics and ragdolls to get a cube that functions as a jelly.
Okay, now we will talk how we sped up development process and how we how we think that development process should be approached by small teams. So in this industry, there are many small teams that are working in hyper-casual game. And one of the key elements is speed. Speed factor is the biggest factor. While now hyper-casual is approaching, speed factor is easing up. So we have a lot more time to work. But we still think that we should manage our time properly. So we do not spend time on the same things that are bothering our development, and we should spend more time in analyzing the trends and analyzing the gameplay and spending more time on creative part and making the game successful. So what have we done? So we created our toolkit system that we recommend everyone to do in such a way that it collects all the scripts that we created before. So it's a basic tip. Why? Everyone does it. Every small team has it in mind, okay, I will make a script that will be reusable. But what have we done alongside that? Many people reuse the scripts that are in gameplay terms. For example, you have the script of hoverboard, how it works, and you will use for another game, etc., if you need it. But one of the biggest things that we should also reuse and automate is in-engine scripts. So this is a little bit technical part, but we want to mention it because this part is for developers. So there are automatizations that will speed up the project building, project setup. So what happens that if you create a blank slate project in, for example, Unity that most people use, in few minutes you can have a project that can be iterated by drag and drop scripts that you collected before, and that you can, after you created that simple gameplay, you can just click and it will be build ready, set up with all SDKs, all packages, and all the analytics software that is working in the background, and loading system, saving system, everything is set up correctly, and it works flawlessly. Why is that important? So because many people struggle with reliability in their systems, because every code, every program in the world has bugs. So it's really important that we create one system that works over the time. So we think that every code that you create, you should import it in a new project and evolve it and make it even more better and reuse it for another project. So evolve the toolkit. So that's what we do. We evolve the toolkit, and we now can over the time, over, for example, 5 or 6 months, you have a stable set of programs and tools that you can easily iterate a game in like 2 days, while before and it will be stable and optimized, while before we will do it in like 2 to 3 weeks. Yeah. And also, what is one of the biggest things that I want to mention is UI. Especially in Unity, UI is slowing down performance and FPS on small devices, especially on Android. So you should approach creating your optimized UI, not download everything from Asset Store, and creating your UI system and your UI assets. So now I said that you shouldn't buy too much from Asset Store, yes, but we think that the Asset Store is one of the key tools for getting content and for getting scripts. How we approach it is that we buy certain scripts that will help us to develop our own scripts, and not too much to have to help us solve all problems. Just help us develop our own solution. That way, you can, when you're evolving the toolkit, you can have one coherent system that works with each other. Because if you just buy things and import in project, that means many people that you do not know they worked on your project and they clutter the project. So it's really important, sum this up, to optimize your game with the reusable scripts, but also your project and engine.
And for those who are wondering, when he mentioned this, some honorable mentions for the assets that are really useful, for example, for editor scripting is Odin Inspector, and like Feel asset is called Feel, that will give haptic feedbacks and many easy and optimized animations for your UI elements, and as well as 3D elements as well. So yeah, those are some honorable mentions for assets. Okay, so as we said, this is something that he already said, but in short, make sure to create your own toolkits and scripts that will automate processes for you. For example, when we use the toolkit he mentioned, we click few buttons, we have all SDKs, everything we need, and our project can be built and tested in a matter of seconds. Our key stores are set up. Only thing we need to do is actually just add a bundle ID for the game, if we're going to test it on the Play Store. If not, we don't need that as well. Buying assets is an amazing way to speed up the development process, but it's really important to buy only the things you need and don't rely too much on everything. Everything you can create it for yourself, evolve it for yourself, and then making sure it works for your future projects. Because when you buy assets, yes, you save time, but if that developer stops supporting the asset, tomorrow your project might not work because you relied on third-party dependency. So assets are amazing, but don't buy too much of them. Make sure to create an easy debug pipeline for all of your games. Now, this could be an SDK that tracks errors in Unity, something like a game analytics SDK or something like that. Or we have a secret tip. We hid the Unity debug console inside of the game, and we only know how to access it by some secret menus, and we can always see the logs, the error logs, the warning logs, everything that will be important in the development from within the game. So we don't need to go on the platforms and look for error logs. So it's a cool idea to embed the Unity's debug console logs inside of the game, so you can access them whenever you want. For example, if you stumble upon a bug, you just open up the console and you will see what the bug is, what the error is in Unity, and it's a cool tip that I don't know if many people use. And make sure to create your own reusable assets that you will use in the toolkit if you create it. Yeah, that's it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, we will be happy to answer. And if you want to meet with us and talk more, we can do it outside. Thank you.